What's up, Simonics, and welcome to a new Ionic tutorial. Today we're starting a new series that I call Build with Ionic, and the first part today is building the Twitter UI with Ionic. There's usually a lot of uncertainty about using Ionic components for more than just the custom or the standard list and the cards and the items. So we're gonna do in this series change the default UI to a more specific UI, like Twitter, like Spotify, like Netflix, like your recommendations. So right now I ask you to put your recommendations for UIs that you want to see with Ionic in the comments. We're not working on the backend side because that would just be too much, so we're gonna use some fake data and implement the UI. And today we will start with Twitter. We will create the tab bar interface, we're gonna use a timeline, we're gonna use this fleet section, we're gonna do the tweets, we're gonna use custom components, a directive to fade the header, to make elements sticky. So really advanced stuff, and in the end a great result. And I hope you enjoyed this new series, so let's do this. Alright, so let's get into the application. For this tutorial, picked the Ionic tabs template. So you can start it with Ionic start, the name of your application, and then tabs. We usually use blank, but tabs just saves a bit of time today. Then I also generated a new module inside the components folder. If we check it out, it's right here, the shared components, and adding -- flat makes sure the components module is right at this top level, so not inside another folder. And that's the same for the directives module, directives, shared directives module also at this level. I've also generated a new component that I call tweet and two directives inside the directives folder. So that's all we need for today. If you bring up Ionic Surf now, you should already see the tab bar with the default layout, and we're gonna dive into that now. But before we do any kind of real coding, we should check out our app module first of all, because we're gonna make an HTTP request to retrieve some dummy JSON data, and therefore we're gonna add the HTTP client module from @Angular common HTTP inside the array of imports. I think that's actually so far everything for the setup. So let's move into the tabs page. For this page, I only applied a few simple changes. Those changes were basically just removing the label and picking different icons. Maybe we could even show this on the side, so it's even more clear what we're doing in this tutorial, since we're really just working with the UI. So now we got 4 tabs right here, which, well, the last tab isn't really a new tab, but I wanted to have that icon, so I don't want to create a new page. We got home, we got search, we got notifications. For notifications, I also added this little badge to show the number of new notifications, but as you can see, it doesn't really completely look like inside the Twitter application. So what I did here is I applied a few changes to the tabs page as CSS for the Ion badge. I just played around with the values to make this work everywhere with a bit bigger font size and font weight. That was basically the most important part about this. Everything else is the padding or the min width and min height, making sure everything looks a bit better. So if we hit save with this now, we can see that we tweaked the Ion badge to become this little bigger circle at the more top position, I'd say. So that is our tab bar, and from now on we're gonna focus on the timeline. We're not going into the other pages. I think the timeline will be enough for today, trust me. If you want to see the other pages, maybe we could do another tutorial on that, so just let me know in the comments. What we're going to do inside our tab 1 page is pretty simple. We're going to inject the HTTP client, not the module, only this one. And we're going to implement the onInit so we can retrieve some values. Within our onInit, we're gonna make a call using HTTP GET to a file that, did I open this somewhere else? Yeah, there it is. So I just faked some tweet data and uploaded it to DigitalOcean. You can also check it out, the full link. I will also put this into the tutorial, Directive, whatever, Twitter, UI, tweets, JSON, stop the video, or use the link below to get to that file. Now, with that information, we can fill a local array of tweets so we can create some more realistic feeling for our application. Let's now also get into the tab 1 page HTML. I will also open the CSS. I'm pretty sure at one point we're gonna need this. So I will remove the references from the default Ionic stuff, and within the toolbar I want to apply a few changes. So instead of having a title with a name, we're gonna have inside the toolbar buttons in the slot start, which is usually to the left with an icon. We're gonna have an Ion title with an icon using the Twitter logo, directly setting the color and also defining the size to make it a bit bigger, and at the end another icon. So that comes pretty close to the Twitter UI. From what we can see here, this is the Android view. I could also use the tools right here to open iPhone preview and hit refresh now. So in that case, we could also see this. Can I somehow close this now and still keep the view up? I actually don't think that's possible. Maybe we can keep it like this. Should be fine as well. Now, within the Twitter UI, you also notice that there's like a control, and we can use a segment control for that. You could also use the super tabs module if you want to have like swipeable tabs to mimic that behavior, but the Ion segment should work fine as well. So the Ion segment needs an ng model to work on, and we're gonna define this in our tab 1 page, and we're gonna set the default one to home. So that means the default value of segment is home. This part is necessary later. And when we have home, we got the first segment button with the value home, the second with whatever content suggests. I just had this in my application as well. If I remove this, we will see something else happening. And that is the segment, of course, has different styling for iOS and Android. And actually, the Twitter application on iOS looks different. And I found that the mode, or setting directly the mode to a material design for both applications looks exactly like it looks on Twitter. So by doing this, you can pick your favorite theme of a component for an Ionic control. Now, since we use the segment to switch between different segments, we could use an ngIf, ngTemplate, but I will actually use hidden because we otherwise get tiny problems with a few of our components. Or do we? I actually think we could also use ngIf. Please remind me if something's broken in the end. Then we're gonna have to change this one to hidden again. So if the segment is equal to home, we can display the content of home, and if it's equal to content, we're gonna display other content that we're actually not gonna display in this tutorial. Now, within the home segment, we wanna display the tweets. We could craft the UI in here, or since we created the custom tweet component, we're gonna use that component. And by default, the new created component has a name app / the name of the component. So we can use app tweet within this page to use a new component that we created. And since we want to have one tweet component for every tweet, we're going to use ng for let tweet of tweets. And we need a way to pass the tweet to that component in the end. But for now, this will first of all not work at all. because app tweet is not a known element. The reason is simple, we haven't added it to our tab 1 module. So simply move to the imports of the page you're editing and add the shared components module. Since we're here, let's also add the shared directives module. We're gonna need this anyway in the end. If we now hit save, we should see a list of our app component. Of course, app tweet is not. Yeah, Ionic Surf is sometimes not really picking up these changes, or actually we made a little issue because inside the shared components module, we're not yet declaring the tweet component. I don't know why the CLI isn't automatically adding it to the declarations and exports. I guess there's a CLI command to do this. But if you create a shared module, you need to make sure that you declare the parts that are inside that module. And if you want to use it somewhere else, also export it. And now we can finally see tweet works. That's the default message of a new component. So that's actually a good step forward. Now, if we check out our tab 1 page or the Twitter UI, you will also notice that there's this new, I think it's called Fleet. I will just call it Story since it looks exactly like Instagram Stories. And therefore, we can use the Ion Slides component. Ion Slides is not like a slide from a PowerPoint presentation. It's really just you can't really explain it. It uses the swiper underneath. We can tweak a lot of the settings. So we're gonna create one slide for every, once again, using our fake data tweet of tweets. And within that slide, we're gonna simply use an Ion avatar, which makes a little bit rounded image. And we can use the tweet image, which is, if I check out the data correctly, yeah, it's just the image of the author. So there we go. Once again, if we now save, we will see in the default way, yeah, that's how the slides look. Of course, that's not how the stories or fleets look, but we're here to apply custom changes to our Ionic components, and to the slides, we can actually pass options. So we're gonna call them options, and we can define them within the according class. So for example, you can define that you want to have 4.5 slides per view. Let's remove this to 4. You can define a bunch of other things here, space, padding, different styling, and I should maybe save the HTML page as well, which now becomes a view. Come on. I think maybe it's called, is it called options? I'm not completely sure what the name was. Yeah, it looks like options. So now we can slide through this, and if you want to have an effect where you see part of the next image, you should use a number like this, 4.5, 4.2, anything that works for you. And then you will see, you will get this little preview of the one slide or how many slides you got. That's not in the view. So that's really something cool that you can add. So far, our view also looks pretty good. We can switch between the segments. We got the app tweets working. And now we should maybe apply a bit of CSS to our tab 1 page. So if you check out the Twitter application, once again, you will see that the toolbar actually has no border. And therefore, we're gonna set the border style of the Ion toolbar to none. How did I find this CSS variable? Well, you can either check out the Ionic documentation for the toolbar, or if you're actively developing stuff, you can just type in -- and then you will, or you should usually find all the CSS values of that. Maybe I should go there. Border with, and at some point I also found the border style setting. So once we apply this, the border at the top should already be gone. I will also add a little fix up front for the Ion header. You can remember this in the end. We're gonna create a directive to scroll out the header, and on an iOS device, there's this little top notch area that becomes transparent. And therefore we're gonna set the background of the Ion header directly to white. Not a huge problem since it's anyway white in here, but that's a fix for the future. Then we're gonna add a little bit more. We're gonna add for the Ion slides some styling to make them look even better and give them a bit more padding. Then for the Ion segment, you can notice that everything is in uppercase. That's an Android default. And so we're gonna set the Ion segment button text transform to none, which makes them use a default case. And also in preparation for our final working header fade, we're gonna set the index of the Ion segment with a background because they will actually be sticky in the end to the top. So this part fades and scrolls out, and this should be sticky to the top. Right now we can't even check it because we're still in this view, but this will become relevant in the end. And finally, our Ion avatar inside the slides or the fleet or whatever it's called should have a border, and we can directly access our Ionic color theme. So now we're already closer to our final result. So how long are we inside the video? Yeah, I expected this to be quite long. Now, the next step is to actually create our custom components. So we can open all the files relevant for it. So the TypeScript file, the CSS and the HTML. So for the tweet component, we need a way to pass information to that component, and we can do this by using or defining an Angular input right here, decorator. Because there's a little trick, because we just call it tweet, we can directly pass the information to this component, but you could also give it a name like my name. But now, since we just got this variable name, we need to use this to pass information to the tweet, and that's how we do it inside the tab 1 page. So that is basically using the input from the tweet component, and that's the value of our iteration. We could use different names, maybe might be more clear for you, but I think you can figure this one out. Inside our init, let's just quickly log this out so we can see what's happening. The component is created now 5 or 6 times, and each got access to the information of one tweet. Now, one thing that I found is the tweet text sometimes contains a hashtag or an ad, so mentioning another name on Twitter, and therefore we're gonna parse this to include specific styling. This is really not super relevant for our Twitter clone, but I wanted to have this UI. And therefore I went through the text using a simple regular expression, catching either the hashtag or the @ sign and replacing this with span class highlight, then the value of the regular expression match, and then a closing span tag. So really just a tiny ugly fix, I'd say. And with that in place, that's actually everything we need for the tweet component. We can craft the tweet component view. Let me put one Ion row class wrapper around everything, and then we can define our styling. If you check out Twitter, once again, you will notice that there's a small column in the beginning. Let's say it has a size of 2, which means we got a size of 10 still left for the rest of our view. So that should be the first step. Ooh, how did I open that one? Don't want to get this. Can we just format the code? That would be cool. All right, and for the first column, we're gonna once again use the Ion avatar just like we did before, using the tweet image. So now we should see that our tweet component comes to life finally. Now, the bigger part of the column, so right in here, is once again, or we can actually separate it once again and start with another Ion row. You can really nest this. Sometimes you need to add Ion no padding, so Ion no padding, stuff like this, if you nest too many rows or columns in one layout. But for us, we're just gonna use the class tweet info. So we're gonna add some custom CSS in here, and then we're gonna use ion column size 12. And within there, we just gonna display the username, the handle, and the time of the post. If we now check this out, we're gonna see that by default, it doesn't really look like Twitter. So that's really why I used like tweet info, name, and handle here. Perhaps we can already add this tweet info, name, and handle. Just playing around with the font sizes, the font weight, or the colors, and suddenly it becomes this. Looks a lot better, I think. Because we're not using an ion list or an ion item, we should also add a separator, and that's why I added the wrapper class to our whole custom component, so we can give it, the whole item a little border at the bottom. Now we can actually separate each of them, and only the tweet message is actually missing, and probably an image that's inside. So we got, okay, now I really need to watch out. We got our column of the size 10. Which means after the row, I think there's still something missing. Sweet Jesus, yeah, actually, no. There's only one thing missing, and that's the actual tweet, that is the tweet text and the attachment. So ion column 12 uses all of the available space. I just opened a new ion row here, well, because I don't want to be inside the tweet info class. So inside that new row, I also use ion column size 12 just to have the same padding and margin like the other rows. And because the tweet text contains HTML tags, I use it with inner HTML. Also, I added an image below if there's an attachment inside the tweet, and we're gonna for sure add some custom styling to that image. Now, if we save this, we're gonna notice that our tweets are not highlighted. This has two reasons. The first reason is we haven't added the highlight class, which is just changing the color to blue. And I think for the preview image, we could also quickly add our custom styling. So the preview image on Twitter usually has a little border and some border radius, and then it should look like this. Looks better, I think. But the mentioning here, or the mentions, are still not highlighted correctly. And the reason is that within our custom component, the inner HTML is separated from the rest of the page. And we can fix this now by going back to the tweet component, and right in here inside the component definition, we're gonna set the encapsulation to view encapsulation none. And by doing this, the inner HTML is also styled accordingly, and we see the blue preview in here. Great, that actually, I really love how this view came together. Now there's only one row missing, and that's the row with all the buttons for resharing and liking stuff. So I'm gonna add this after the current row is closed. This is really just another ion row. I hope we're still fine with our rows and columns. You just need to make sure that you got row and then column, and then you can use row again, not row, row, row. Or maybe that would work, but I don't think it would work great. So I'm gonna put justify the content center for each of our column, and we got 4 columns. First column, using a button. I have no functionality attached to that button. For the response count, so we got an icon and then the response count. Then we got a button for the retweet and the retweet count, and same for like and share. For the retweets, I also added a little variable inside our JSON. So if I have retweeted or liked the data actually won't be changed. It's just a static JSON file, but we can fake this by just directly setting our local data to not retweet. And therefore we can also add conditional styling to both of these buttons right here by using color. Usually you just use Is there some other reference right here? Color, medium, but if you add the brackets around it, you can have a calculation or checking a value or anything right here. So we're gonna check the tweet, retweet. This is just the quick way of doing it. If this is true, we're gonna use primary styling. Otherwise, we're gonna use the medium color styling, and same right here. So with that in place, we can hit save once again. And we should see that our tweet component now looks great. We can click these buttons. They actually also change color. And the whole view is really close to the Twitter UI with just a bit of additional CSS and the Ionic styling. But now the hard part begins. We want to fly out this header area and we want to keep this segment inside the view, which is really both not happening at the moment. So we're gonna move into our directives. Now things are about to get really interesting. We're gonna also leave the tab 1 page open since we're gonna do a bit of work in there as well. Let's start, no, not the spec file, not today's spec file, not today. We're gonna start inside the tab 1 page HTML. Or no, sorry, we're gonna have to do the same thing we did for the shared components, and that is open the shared directives module. In here, interesting enough, both directives were added to the declarations. I have no idea why they were added in this case, but not inside the shared components. I really just used the same commands, so that's really strange. Anyway, what we're gonna do now is, first of all, we're gonna change inside the tab 1 page our Ion content. What we wanna do is we wanna set the full screen value to true. Otherwise, the content would always stop at this point and not scroll behind this. This is just a little fix or a little change that we need for our animation effect. Then we also wanna add scroll events true. I actually don't know why I added the brackets. I think it should work like this as well. And now for our app hide header directive, that's actually the name of the directive. We want to add this directive to the Ion content because then we can easily listen to scroll events. Basically, we want to listen to the scroll events of the Ion content. And when we scroll up, we also at the same time want to scroll up the header area and fade it out. That's the whole idea. So we got access to the scroll events by attaching the directive to Ion content, and we also need access to the actual Ion header area here. And therefore we're gonna add a template reference right here. Let's call this one header, and then we're gonna pass that to our directive just like we passed information previously to the custom component. We also do the same for the segment here and already prepared this, and I can already tell you that the app sticky segment now also goes in here, and we pass the segment control because this will make sure the segment control also scrolls up but then sticks at the top of our screen. Okay, great. So far this hopefully can't bind to as no Ion content. Okay, did we add the module shared directives module is in place. Tab 1 module got the directive. Yeah, perhaps I should just reload. Sometimes Ionic Serve really fixes your issues. If not, then you're in trouble, but usually that's really the fix for a lot of problems. So now we can go back to or actually get started with the hide header directive. We used this in a different tutorial in the past as well, a tiny bit different. But what we want to do is we're gonna define an input for the header. Just like we did for the component, that's where the actual header element comes into this. Then we're gonna also set the header height automatically. Calculating it never really worked for me, so that's why I changed to just setting it in here. And within the constructor, we now also need the renderer. So the renderer 2 from Angular core. And we're gonna also inject the Ionic DOM controller to have more performant writes and updates to the DOM once we fade out or change positions. We also gonna add implements after view init, and then add the ng after view init to get our element. I will also put a little log in here. So this header, this dot header, to see what's actually going on, and this dot header, maybe I will just do it after we've set both of the values. This dot, let's also do the children. Now I'm creating these children for a specific reason. If we fade out everything from the header, we got a space in the application where we don't have the white background and everything's kind of messed up. So we technically want to keep the header at some point and only fade out the toolbar, but we still want to move out the header. So now this children, we got a collection which is just the Ion toolbar, and we got access to the header inside the directive as well. That's great news for now. Now we're gonna implement another cool thing, and that's the host listener for our directive. Since the Ion content is basically the host of this directive, we can listen to the Ion scroll event. And whenever we got an event, let's just log it out, event, we will see that we catch that event. So trying to scroll custom event all the time. And within is also a value that's called scroll top, detail scroll top, and you see now it's at 0. Previously it was somewhere else. And detail scroll top is the distance that we scrolled from top. Now it should be at some other value. So now we are 248. And that is the value we want to grab. So let's extract it from the event. And then we're gonna set our new position, which is the new position of the header, to minus scroll top. Of course, that would be kind of terrible to use this new position. So we also gonna add another check if the new position is below minus this dot. Okay, what did I thought here? No, I just want to make sure that this value is basically the boundary. So we will not set the new position to minus 100. We will always then set it to minus 44 or minus 56. Otherwise, the header would just completely fly out of the view. Since we also want to change the opacity, we can calculate the new opacity by using this value. So the new position divided by the header height, which is at most 1. Which means we will have a value in the end between 0 and 1 for the new opacity, which fades out our element. Cool. Now we can use the DOM controller to write the update to the DOM. The Ionic DOM controller handles this quite cool because it's not immediately saying to the DOM, okay, you need to repaint this now, do it now. That's gonna mess up the repaint and restructuring of your view. Instead, the Ionic DOM controller will schedule this for the appropriate time. This doesn't mean it takes like a second until it's executed. It's really fast, but it just handles it under the hood in a better way. So in our case, we're gonna now use the renderer to change the styling. So we're gonna call this renderer set style. We wanna change the styling of our header element. And what we're gonna do is we wanna change the top property to new position. Hopefully I'm not covering this, plus pixel. Okay, that's the new position. Perhaps we should save this now and check out if this is actually working. So we're gonna slowly scroll now, and yeah, it's moving out. It's moving out, right? So the header is leaving our view, just like expected. But we also at the same time want to fade out the icons, and therefore we're gonna iterate now the children and set the opacity of each item within that area of children to our new opacity. Basically it's just one item, but maybe you have more. So now can I get it like a scroll bar? Now you see, if I scroll up, it moves out and fades out, which gives a lot nicer view. Cool. The first part is working. We're scrolling out the header, but the ion segment is also lost. And that's where the second directive takes over. I will now bring in the code for this because it's basically the same. We're gonna define the input just like we did before. We're gonna get the height, we're gonna set the element to the actual element, and we're gonna listen to the scroll event. And we're also gonna calculate the position. But this time the new position, yeah, actually then that's still the same, isn't it? Maybe we could have done this in one. Maybe we could have this done in one directive, but I think now, since we're doing it in two different places, I think it's more cleaner to have two different directives. Let's take a look what happens. This also gets to the top, and then we're lost. Why is this happening? There's a simple reason. Within our tab 1 page, we have defined the ion segment within the ion content. So unless we use absolute positioning for the ion segment, it will always scroll out since it's part of the ion content. A quick solution is to put the ion segment simply outside of the ion content. That means it's now in a different place. It still looks the same like we did before. Remember how we used ion segment, the index above everything else, and then we're gonna check out, and there it stops. Now we're able to fade out our header, and the segment is still sticky to the top. That's exactly the UI we were after. We got the timeline with the different functionalities, highlighting, styling, rows, grid layout. We got the scrolling era for the fleets, and we also got this cool directive which fades out one part of the header right here and moves it up, and then also moves up the other, but makes sure it sticks to the top of our screen and is sticky in place. And then in the end, if we scroll back, everything comes back up, and we're done with the Twitter Ionic UI. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this first video tutorial in a series of new posts about creating more advanced UIs with Ionic. We've seen a lot in this tutorial, from using JSON data, using the rows, custom components, directives, shared modules, really a lot of information in this video. And if there's any other UI, specific UI that you want to see built with Ionic, please leave it in the comments. I already think about a few different other cases, and I'm sure you will enjoy those videos as well. If you found this helpful, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more great Ionic videos and general web development tips, and I will catch you next time like always. So happy coding, Simon.